Thank you guys for hopping on here. I'm excited to be able to share this with you guys. Been using this for 4 or 5 years now. Got this from my uncle. My uncle Dave he is the volleyball coach at Murray State, Dave Schwecker. He's probably been using it for about 10 years and took me a while to adopt it into basketball, and we've been using it and having pretty good success. So I'm going to work on sharing my screen, and then we'll go through this PowerPoint, and yeah, we'll do the questions at the end. I'm going to try to be as concise as possible. But one of the most difficult things with this is getting it across quickly. Okay, so in the tournament system, players will, I'm going to try and minimize this on the side. Sorry. Players will compete to earn points in practice that will result in rankings. And I'm going to explain all of this as we go. These rankings will determine who will be starters. The system, though, is ultimately about building habits. And I think that is the biggest thing that I've come to learn is it's not as much about who starts and who doesn't, but it's about building habits. Also motivating each player to be at his best daily and learn skills and tactics through playing the game. So I'm a big Chris Oliver fan, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are as well. Obviously, he's got a great podcast and a great website. And a lot of his teachings of basically teaching the game through playing the game really aligns with what we do here with this system. So I'm sure you guys have seen this in your coaching, where athletes will lack a competitive drive. You get into practice and people are kind of going through the motions. Seeing this a lot at our school is unrealistic view of their ability and their performance. People think, or guys think, that they are a lot better than they are. On the other side, there's some guys that are afraid to compete. They're afraid to get after it because they don't want to fail. We see that a lot. Feeling entitled to playing time. I'm sure every one of you has dealt with that as well, where people think that they should be starters. They should be playing 30 minutes a game. And they just think that that's just, maybe they're a senior now and they just deserve that. And so this really helps with that. Coaches need to use carrots and sticks, kind of just like these fake rewards, and trying to get your players to get motivated. Another thing we kind of, this is something I've been talking about a lot with our coaches, is our culture, just meaning like the culture of competitive sports and basketball in general. Defines competition the wrong way. I really think that competition should be used to become the best version of yourself, and where some people will look at competition as a bad thing or it's just so cutthroat. I just think that we need to frame competition in a better way, and I think that this system helps with that. And then the other thing is players are unequipped to handle winning and losing, and we'll kind of get into how that can be dealt with as we go here. So here are some outcomes of the system. It will create an ultra competitive environment. Every day is extremely competitive, and what you'll find if you end up adopting this is that you're dealing with more of the other side of, like, instead of a lack of competition, sometimes guys go a little crazy, and you got to deal with the emotions of being overly competitive and not handling when things don't go well, and you really get to tackle that in practice instead of in a big game. Next thing is it objectively rewards the players who are currently playing the best, not who played the best in the summer, but it's who's playing the best now. And some guys come out hot in preseason and they're in good shape, and so they look really good, and then as the season goes on, other guys catch up or pass them. And what this system does is it keeps you fighting for your playing time, your starting spot, all the way through. And going to kind of come back to a lot of these things after I explain how it works. Players and parents buy into roles, and so it's an easier conversation than, well, I like Joe, so we're going to start Joe because I like his game. It's an easier system to you objectively lay out, well, he's earned the right to start, or he's earned the right to be a rotational player. Or on the other side, he hasn't earned it, so now he's going to be a reserve, and he's not in the rotation until he earns the right to be in the rotation. Improvement throughout the season is the biggest advantage. Period. We see incredible growth from November to March every year, and it's because we focus so much more on improvement than we do on specific game plan or getting ready for Friday's game. Not that we don't do that. We still work on that, and I'll kind of explain how that folds into it in a little bit. But the main thing is we're going to improve throughout the season. So then at the very end, when we get to district or playoff time, we're at our best. And that's happened every year. For example, last year, we lost to a school called Blue Springs South out of Kansas City. They beat us by 15 early in the year. And then the first round of districts, we ended up beating them by 25. Hickman is another Columbia school here in Missouri, a big rival for us. They beat us by 2 in the regular season, and we beat them by, I think, 22 in the second round of districts. And so we just always see improvement every single year, and it really shows in games like that. The other thing it does, it really builds leadership qualities, and you'll kind of see why, but every player has to play or gets to play with every other player on the team. And so you're always having to learn how to lead, how to work with all of your teammates instead of like just the starting 5. And so you get to build leadership, you get to learn that the best players get to understand how to lead. And then that really helps as the season goes on as well. And then there's a really good challenge to skill ratio. So big on flow, big on, optimizing learning, and you need to be in that sweet spot. It needs to be challenging, but it can't be overwhelming. And so what's nice about this system is that it's challenging for the best player, and then it's also challenging for the worst player, and then everywhere in between. And I know a big issue that I used to deal with before I used this was, how do you motivate your best player or your best couple of players? As that can be tough because sometimes they're far and away better than everybody else in the team. Well, this system pushes them, and you might need to challenge your best player. You need to be number 1 in the rankings all year long. That might be how you challenge your best player, but instead of stacking the team, starters versus reserves all the time, where it's just dominance, or, varsity versus JV, this is mixing everybody up. It's now your best player has to learn how can I win with each group. And so we'll kind of get into the nuts and bolts of how it works. And I know there's going to be a lot of questions, so yeah, just put them in the chat, and I will answer them all at the end. I think that'll probably be the best way. Okay, so how it works. The evenly mixed players. Okay, everyone plays with everyone equally. So that's easier to see on the spreadsheet here in a second, but that is a big component of it. We will use small-sided games as well as 5-on-5. And I like both for different reasons. When we do small-sided games, we pretty much do 3-on-3. And a lot of times when we do 3-on-3, we will shrink the court. And so it's a little bit more time on task, a little bit more, you have the ball in your hands a lot more with 3-on-3. So when we're doing 3-on-3, we're looking at building skills and maybe small concepts, maybe something like putting a ball screen, working on our ball screen defense. And so when you play 3-on-3, you're going to be able to be involved in the ball screen a lot more. And so we'll use the small-sided games for that. And then 5-on-5 will be more big picture team concepts. Maybe we're working on execution. Just depends on what we're working on for that day, for that tournament. To do that, we will use constraints. So if you're a Chris Oliver fan, he talks about constraints all the time. And so a couple of different ways we can do that. And I've got a list we'll kind of go through, just as some examples later, but we can change the scoring. And so maybe it's you get 2 extra points if you score on an assisted basket. Okay. We may change different rules, or maybe rules isn't a great way to say it, but maybe we play half court instead of full court. Okay. Or maybe we only play using half of the court in 3-on-3 instead of being able to use the entire half court. And so we'll just change things to be able to work on what we're trying to work on. Okay. Now, get more into that later. So gathering objective data to determine rankings. So what's nice about this is you get to, everybody's score is very clear and very laid out, and you earn that score as you go. So what you want to do is win as a team. Okay, you'll play on these different, every round you'll have different teams, and it'll look clearer on the next page. But it's very objective. Instead of somebody passing the eye test, like, ooh, I like his shot, or you guys know how it goes, like, oh, he's athletic, he's got long arms, he's got to be a good defender. Well, instead of just kind of like thinking that, kind of think of Moneyball. If you guys have seen the movie Moneyball, where they talk about, oh, he's got a really smooth swing, or he's got a lot of power, yada yada yada. It's more about like, well, which players are actually affecting winning, and that's what matters, and that's what we need to figure out. Because if a guy can score a lot, but he takes all the shots, but he doesn't defend, you guys know that sometimes that doesn't always equal winning. Or you might have another guy who does all the dirty work and can defend and talks and communicates on defense and does all of those things. That might actually lead to winning more than a guy that can score. And so this is just very objective, and you get rid of kind of your biases on what you think it should be, and you get to clearly see, well, who's winning and why are they winning. And then the player average is always current. So we keep it current throughout the whole season by only averaging the 8 most recent tournaments. And so typically we'll do a tournament a day is how we've been doing it. I may change that into the future. We're kind of toying with some different ideas, but basically each practice we're going to run a tournament. And so we only keep the 8 most recent to average together. So that way it keeps the scores fresh. Okay. And the last thing on here is that the scores and rankings are always made available to players. They need to know where they stand, and they need to know quickly. So we use Google Sheets because the guys can check it on their phone. And what I started doing last year, just to be even more clear, is that I would, as soon as we had the scores tallied, which was usually within 10 minutes at the end of practice, I was sending out a text with a screenshot of the rankings. That way, everybody knows where they stand all the time. And I think that that's really important because that keeps them motivated. Okay, let's see if I can go. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so this may look a little bit overwhelming, and it's a lot, but this will help explain what is really going on. So this top spreadsheet is what a tournament will look like. Okay, so each player, if you look down here on the bottom, each player is connected to a number. And so we have number 1 was Mar, number 2 was Chris G, number 3 is Jack, number 4 is Keon, and so on and so on. So each round they will look. Okay, we write this up on a whiteboard. We have team white, and then this was team blue. Got erased there. So team white for round 1 is 14, 8, 1, 2, and 12. So then they would go over to the board and look. And so Ethan was on white. Keon here, number 8 is white. Number 1 was Mar. 2, Chris G. And then 12 was Rio. So those 5 guys are white. And then the same thing for blue. So then they go out on the court you have white versus blue. We usually play a 3-minute round. Okay. So we play, and then these guys over here, they're off for that round. So they get a bye. All right. So what'll happen is everybody, ideally, everybody will play with and against everyone else equally. So you're always mixing up. You're always on different teams. You always have different teammates. They're not always perfect. I like to just do 5-on-5. And if you are able to, let's say one team doesn't have a point guard, well, that means that there's guards out there that can't handle the ball really that well. And one of them is going to have to step up. And so what it does is it shows you who is the most versatile and who is the most well-rounded and who can figure out a way to win with an imperfect team. Okay. And so we would play that round out. Okay. Let's say we play 3 minutes, and let's say our scoring was you get +2 for an assisted basket. Okay. So let's say somebody drives and kicks, the guy hits a 3, they get, that's worth 5. So all 5 guys on white have their score, and then all 5 guys on blue have their score. So it's team scores. Okay. So like for this first round, they tied because we just do plus minus. So like in this second game, it might have been 18-10, but you basically only get points if you win. Okay. So you just take the plus. And then this team that lost over here in round 2, they get nothing because they lost. So every time you lose, you get 0. Every time you win, you get how many points you won by. Okay. I know that's a lot. So then we're going to keep moving just so I can give you the full scope and I can go back and answer questions as we go. So now what we do, we finish it at practice. Okay. And we'll have a manager plug these scores in. And so for the first round, everybody that played gets 0. For the second round, everybody that played, oh, I need to go back. Everybody that won, so you have all these numbers down here, 8, 8, 8. Everybody that won got 8, and everybody that lost got 0. Same thing for round 3. Then round 4, everybody that won got 12. Everybody that lost got 0. And if you didn't play, it's blank. And then what we'll do at the end is you average out how many points per round do they get. And that's only for the rounds they play in. And then you times it by 100 just to get your percentage over here. So the best player for that day was Jack Putnam, which that happened a lot last year. So Jack gets 100. That's the most you can get. And then everybody else is averaged off of that. And it's basically like a curve on a test. Okay. So then we take those scores. I showed it here again. Okay. Well, this is how do I get this out of the way? Well, okay. So what this is, I don't like how I can see the top. Let me go back here. Hopefully you guys are still able to see this okay. I just wanted you to be able to see the top of it here. So 1127 was what we were looking at. Okay. So this scoring came from November 27th. So all of those total scores right here. So you see Jack had 100 and then everything else is balanced off of that. So that was a day. So that's one score. And we do that for every day. And this is the 8 most recent. They get their current average, which is right here on the left. And then we total those up and we rank them out. And so what you see here is their current rankings down here on the bottom left. And so we have Ethan, Tate, Jack are 1, 2, 3. And then top 8 would be who plays. And then everybody else is sitting the bench for that next game. Okay. So let's see here. And I can go back to this when we do questions if we need to. Okay. So I know there's probably questions on that, but I'm going to keep rolling. Let's see if I can. All right, let's go from here. This will work. So, I have the game. I feel like I have that out of order. That's all right. All right. So, some rules, constraints, or scoring ideas. just kind of how it works. We may go with zone. We may go with man to man. Just depends on what we want to work on, and our focus may be on our offense for man to man, but obviously we're still going to play man to man defense. We have our principles there, so we try to figure out things that can kind of sharpen both. So I'm a big dribble drive fan. I love those concepts, creating double and triple gaps, and so we will want to drive middle all the time. Well, our defense is the exact opposite. We want to keep drives out of the middle. So what we might do is give the offense 2 points for a middle drive. Okay. And so what that's going to do is iron sharpens iron, and both sides of the ball are working on things that we need to work on. And so it's going to happen naturally and organically. Instead of setting up a drill where somebody catches the ball and tries to drive middle, this is going to happen all the time. So it might be like, if you get to the middle, you get 2 feet in the paint, and you get all the way without turning the ball over, and that's 2 points for your team. And then they just keep playing off of that. It might be +2 for making the first shot of a possession. We do this one a lot because sometimes your better athletes will just drive in, throw up some chaos, and know that I can just go get my own rebound and put it back in. Well, when you go play against the best teams in your league, you can't always get away with that. So we sometimes we need to focus in on, we need to make the first shot of the possession, right? To focus in, make sure we take a good shot, and then we have focus on that shot and not just rely on our overall athleticism. Another thing we do all the time is a turnover for missed execution. So let's say we're running a dribble drive, we have a slot to slot pass, and the guy forgets to cut. Well, that's an automatic turnover. Boom. We blow it dead. It's the other team's ball, and we're going the other way. And they learn so fast how to execute offense when they turn it over for messing it up, because their teammates get on them. Their teammates get on them hard because they need to know, or they know that affects their score. So if me and John are on the same team and he messes up, I'm going to make sure that I let him know. So now coaches don't have to do it because players are coaching themselves. Okay. Another one might be +2 for rebound, or +2 for forcing a turnover. Let's say we're working on our press. We want to force turnovers, and then at the same time, offensively, you want to take care of the ball. So we might reward somebody for, a team for forcing a turnover. This was a huge one for us, honestly. I put it on here because even if you don't use this system, I would find a way to implement this. But we gave extra points if somebody has an assist. Like, let's say I drive and kick to John hits the 3. If we point at each other after, and I think I stole this from USA Basketball, point at each other after that make, basically saying, hey, good shot, good pass, you get 2 extra points for that. Really helps to build team chemistry. They're always looking for that. And then we saw that in games all the time. So that was really cool to see. And I already talked about, half court or full court. So a practice design example, okay, which is probably a question I get as much as any. But let's say we're going to work on execution. Okay, that's what this example is here. Let's say I don't want to go through this. So and you can kind of move these around as you see fit. And we try to move them around. Like, we might do the tournament in the middle of practice sometimes, or we split it up different ways. But here's just a quick example. The first hour is going to be non-tournament. Okay, so we might get in the gym, and if we're working on execution, we'll do a little walkthrough. Okay, maybe we're going to review our plays for 10 minutes, just our sets, or whatever sort of execution you want to work on. Maybe you're working on baseline out of bounds, something like that. I like doing it at the beginning because we kind of go half speed. We know we're not fully warmed up, so it's just a mental rehearsal. Okay, then we go into our dynamic warm-up. Then let's say we do some shooting or skill work just to get our blood flowing and make sure we're ready to go. Then we'll go into a transition into offensive execution drill. All right, so maybe we sprint down to one side, run through a play 5-on-0. Now we're coming back, we're running it 5-on-5 versus defense. So something like that where we're moving, we're working on execution, and it's against guided defense. Okay. Then we would do a live execution drill where us coaches are going to be doing tons of teaching, where we're stopping it on every little mistake that we, as far as execution goes, angle of screens, timing on coming off screens, when to roll, when to short roll, when to pop, stuff like that. And that's you can really teach during this segment. During the non-tournament part is when you're doing a ton of teaching, because this is the player's chance to really learn what you've got going on. So what are we learning? What are we really working on for the day? Whatever you work on in the non-tournament part of practice should build and lead into the tournament. Because I'm really big on, we're going to really get better at this one thing for the day. So today we're going to get really good at executing our horn sets. So the whole thing we're going to lead up to, we're working on our horn sets, then we're doing it semi-live, then we're doing it all the way live with a lot of teaching. And that's for your chance to really, really teach. Okay. Then I like to go into a little bit more of a mindless activity, working on skills. I mean, you can load this as much or as little as you want, depending on what your team needs. But I like to go into like post guard split. Maybe we're just working on shooting and just going through our reps of getting our post moves, and just something where they can kind of take a mental break before we dive into the tournament, because the tournament is not only physically demanding, but it is very mentally demanding. Okay. And it is a lot for players to take, and you will deal more with their stress levels than you'll deal with anything else. Okay. So we go for this tournament. Let's say we're working on execution. We're going to go half court. We're going to do it to turnover for missed execution, and then +2 for executing a set. All right. You execute that set, you get 2 extra points, and there you go. So that's a little example of how we would run a practice. And then the next biggest thing, and then I'll talk about some more benefits of the system, kind of wrap it up, and then open up for questions. But game management, and this is something that I've toyed around with over the past few years, and I really like what we did last year, and so that's what I'm presenting here. Is the top 3 players in the rankings will start, no matter what. Those 3 guys will start. And so that is a big motivator for most guys. They want to start. And this makes it to where if you want to be a starter and you want there to be no doubt, no matter who you are, whether you're a freshman, or sophomore, or senior, if you want to start, you get in that top 3, and there's nothing the coaches can do. They have to start you. And then the next 2 starters are going to be picked by the coaches, but they have to be from players ranked 4 to 8. So if we go back here, if you look at our ranking, Ethan, Tate, and Jack are going to start for sure. And then I get to pick, as the coach, between 4 through 8, I get to pick the last 2 starters. And what that has allowed us to do is to make sure that we always have a good ball handler, or a point guard type player. And then also we make sure that we have enough size out there. Okay. So it might be that your center is in the top 3 and your point guard's in the top 3. Well, then you can just pick the guys that you think are the best matchups or the best way to start the game. But that we used to do just the top 5 started, and then we'd start games with no point guard out there, and we get pressed, and all of a sudden we're down 8, and that was not a good way to start games. So this gives you a little bit more freedom as a coach to make sure you've got the right type of lineup out there. The next thing is top 8 is your rotation. Now, if you're a team if you like to play 9 or 10 guys in your rotation, and that's what you're comfortable with, then by all means, you could go with that. I like 8 because that's just my style. It's just what's worked best for me over the years. So that's the number that I'm comfortable with. But like that can be changed based on what the coach believes in. I just think playing 10 guys and getting them all in is tough to do, especially because I'm just not a big press guy. I'm not running the Grinnell system. So that's kind of up to the coach's discretion. But your top eight's your rotation. And so that gives the incentive of making sure that even if you're not able to start or fight for a starting position, you still have the chance to get in the rotation. And so whether you're a freshman or senior, it doesn't matter. You always have something to work for. Okay. Players 9 and up are not in the rotation. Now, once the game begins, you coach like normal. So let's say a player earned the right to start and he's second or third in the rankings, and he goes out there and has defensive lapses and then turns the ball over a couple times and takes a couple terrible shots. Well, you pull him, take him out. You still get to coach the game. It's not like you don't have a chance to make substitutions. And so basically players earn the right to start or be in the rotation. They get their chance in practice to be given the chance to start or be in the rotation. After that, you have to go perform and help the team win. Okay. So if somebody goes out there and they just don't know what's going on, they're having a bad day, they're whatever, you don't have to play them. And I think that's kind of a misconception that other coaches have had when I tell them about this, is you're not locked into having to play somebody a certain amount of minutes. I'm a high school coach. There's no general manager telling me I've got to play, somebody X amount of minutes, or because it's in his contract or whatever. We just get to, a high school coach, we're just trying to win, trying to help build the team. And so you get to coach like normal from that top 8. And what I've done on occasion, I don't like to do it very often, is if we're getting just really beat up and playing terribly, and the guys that are in the top 8 and they're just not getting it done, if we get into that, let's say we're down 15 at halftime and the guys in the top 8 just are flat out not getting the job done, then I will go to number 9 on occasion and be like, okay, let's see if you can do something to help us win. And then they can go in, they have a chance. If they go in and play well, great. Then they're going to finish out the game and let's do it like normal. If they don't, we might take him out and put in number 10. And I like to kind of go in that order, give guys chances like that. I've done that a few times. I don't do it very often, and it's usually when the team is pretty desperate, but that still goes to the top 8 had a half to figure it out. They didn't. Okay, let's see if somebody else on the team can. And then the last little point I wanted to make here before I get to the last few benefits of it is it is difficult to give up the control of just picking and choosing who starts and who plays, but it is absolutely worth it in the end. You end up building character, you build your team so much more by doing it this way than anything I had done in the past, that I just really, really think it's worth it. And then this is the last slide here, and then we will open it up for questions. But every player has the opportunity to play. That is a huge, huge benefit when players really see that their work in practice is truly rewarded. I know a lot of coaches like to say, you earn your playing time in practice, but at the same time, they still end up starting the same guys because that's just what the coach believes. So this really helps to motivate players. It's fun and engaging. Players love it. They love it and they hate it because it's stressful, but they love it. They love for the chance to play. Every day you're playing a ton, whether it's 3-on-3 or 5-on-5, and that's what players love to do. You earn confidence. So if you earn the right to start, then you did it and it wasn't given to you. And that is a huge, huge difference maker in players. Develop leadership skills like I talked about. I love that part of it. They learn how to talk to all their players. They learn how to play with all of their teammates. And I love that. Maximize improvement. We talked about that before. Practice directly translates to the game. So a lot of times being able to play in this constraints way, it helps to shape the way you play, but it really translates to the game. So when we work on 3-on-3 and we're working on our ball screens there, and you get extra points for executing an ice okay, or let's say that the players really learn how to ice. They really learn it. So then when we get in the game, you know how ball screens will pop up out of nowhere. Well, the players know how to handle it because they've had to do it in practice. And then they get to compete every day. So players obviously love to compete. As far as parents and administration is concerned, you know, it teaches self-responsibility and ownership. I think all parents want to see their kids learn that, builds characteristics to help with academics, future careers, family lives. You get to really work through adversity every single day, and that has been a huge benefit to be able to talk to guys. It just changes the conversation when, coach, what do I need to do? Instead of just asking, what do I need to do to start? You know, what do I need to do for you? They ask, what can I do to score better in the tournament? And so it just opens up a different conversation. Maybe somebody is talented, but they're hard to play with, and they constantly bitch, and they're constantly just down on their teammates. You know, it gives you a chance to talk about that when they're ready to talk about it. And I think that has had a huge impact on our teams and our young men. Learn how to get along with others while being competitive. That's a fine line, right? You want to be ultra competitive. You want to hold your teammates accountable, but you still need to get along with them even when things are down. And so we get to talk about that. I mean, we talk about that constantly, especially in the preseason and while we're building it up. That's a big learning point. Opens up opportunities to teach life lessons. Like I said earlier, overcoming adversity, teamwork, handling stress. That's a big one. Learning how to handle stress. I think this puts them in the fire, and then they have to deal with it. And so it's really good. It's a good way and a safe way to learn about handling stress, when I'd rather them learn during high school basketball than when they're 25, they've got a 2-year-old, and that's their first real adversity. I think it's better to learn it during basketball. And then the last thing is clarity around playing time. Everybody knows where they stand, and everybody knows what they should be doing. And those conversations are a lot easier to be had than just, well, you need to work on your ball handling. I think that's a cop-out, and I think that doing this tournament system, you can be, well, what do you do? What can you do well that's going to help your teams win? And I think that changes the conversation for the better. So that is the end of that. Let's see if I can take it off screen share. And okay, hopefully that made a little bit of sense. And I will, I guess, do some questions now, if anybody has any.
Awesome. Well, the one question we got so far, it says, I think you kind of touched on this too, but it says players 9 and on do not dress, or they do not play, just do not play.
So they'll dress. So like we keep, we're going to have 12 players on the team this next year. And so the 9, 10, 11, and 12 they'll dress, but they just are not in the rotation. But like I said, I think I mentioned, I probably answer this after you already asked, but if we need to, we'll go to 9, then 10, and they'll play, but they're just not going to be in that regular rotation.
Awesome. And the next question is, who scores during practice? Managers, coaches, etc.
Yeah, so we'll keep a score. If it's a 5-on-5, we'll just keep the score on the big scoreboard because it's team scores. And then at the end of the round, either a coach or a manager will write it on the board. So they'll write 8-0. We had a good manager this last year, and so she made it way better. Having a good manager with this is a game changer. So finding somebody that's willing to do it, and they're going to be active, they're going to be involved, or having an assistant coach do it is fine. But you keep the score on the scoreboard and then you write it down. Now, sometimes we'll do 3-on-3 and we'll have 2 courts going, which I didn't dive into. And then we'll have a coach on each basket, and they'll referee, and then they'll also keep score. But then what we started doing was we made the players keep score. And every time there was a bucket, they had to call it out basically before there was another check. And if they didn't know the score, it went back to 0-0. And so what you find is after they make that mistake once, they keep score and they make sure that it's done correctly.
Great. The next question asked, how many coaches and managers do you use to run tournaments?
I think it helps to have 2 coaches at least, so like a head coach and an assistant, and then maybe 1 manager would be ideal. But really, you could run it with 2 coaches, and you could get it done. I think that would probably be the bare minimum. When I first started it, we did it at a small school. We had 18 players total, and me and another coach, and we had a manager, and we got it done, and it was pretty effective. Hope that answers that.
Great. The next question asked, how long are games? I'm assuming they can be adjusted depending on skills, constraints, etc.
Yeah, that can be adjusted for sure. We like 2.5 minutes, and we do running clock is what we found to be the best. I like 2.5 minutes, and then we get into the last. What we'll do is anytime there's a free throw. So what we'll do, let's say somebody drives and gets fouled. Okay, we will stop the clock on that because free throws take a little bit of extra time. So we'll stop the clock there, and then they'll shoot 1 shot for however many points it's going to be. So let's say he drove, got fouled, it'd be 1 shot, and if he makes it, it's worth 2. If not, it's live and we're back into action. But I like 2.5 minutes per round. I think that's pretty good. If you wanted to stretch it out and go longer, like let's say you wanted to, if you're okay with your tournament taking an hour and a half, you could stretch it out to 3 or 4 minutes. I think that kind of drags on a little bit. So I like 2.5 minutes though.
Great. The next question asked, you said that only the winning team gets points. Why doesn't the losing team get to keep their points?
So we basically wanted to do it based on plus minus. And the reason we used to keep total scores, but what we found is that was hurting teams. So let me give you an example. It was hurting teams that lost but played well. And so you might have one game where it's two groups, 5-on-5, and neither group played any defense. And so the score ended up like 25-23, okay, in 2.5 minutes. Well, that was still rewarding that team that lost by just they would just let people score because they wanted to get the ball back so they could score. Okay, so what we found is that by only doing the plus minus, and all that matters was how much you won by, the defense got way, way better because now playing defense really mattered. So now let's say you lose a game 10-8, you're not getting punished by playing good defense, because if it would be like, well, I lost by 2 and we scored 8 versus we lost by 2 and now I get 23 points. So I kind of run the offense for us. I mean, I'm the head coach, so I could just kind of do whatever, but I like to run the offense. I'm an offensive minded guy, but when I was seeing just people, our teammates were letting other guys score just to get the ball back, I just didn't like that. And so we figured out that actually raised the level of defense in practice and made a big impact. Now, what we're going to do next year, I haven't done this yet, and I haven't, verified that it's going to work. I'm going to kind of play with it in preseason. What we're going to do now is we'll take that plus minus, and let's say you win by 10, the team that lost is going to get -10 because we really just want to punish losing. And that's an idea that we're going to toy around with, and stay tuned for that. I don't know how that's going to work, but I want to punish losing really, really bad because I hate when guys don't care that they lose. That drives me crazy.
Awesome. The next question asks, do the players that are 7 through 12 get more playing time at a lower level, such as JV?
That's a good question. So Yes and no. It depends on their age and it depends on the situation. You could do that however you want it. What we do is I I believe in the best players need to be up on varsity. And we're at a big school. And so like this year we have a freshman who's a stud. I mean, he's really good. He went to the Peach Jam this past weekend. So he's the real deal. If he's struggling, which he's a freshman and he may struggle, like he may have times where he's going to practice varsity and he may be struggling in practice because he's young. We're going to play him on JV the whole game if he doesn't get in the rotation. If there's a sophomore that we have, which we have a couple of sophomores that will play on varsity, they might be good enough to start. They might, they're definitely good enough to be in the rotation. But if they're down and they're kind of struggling, they're 10th or 11th in the rankings, yeah, they'll play JV. Juniors, I don't like to play on JV, but I have in the past, and I think that kind of depends on each program situation. When I was at a school called Fayette, it was a really small school. I think we had 150 kids in the whole high school. Like we would have juniors that just started playing basketball and they'd be good athletes, but they needed time on the court. So we would have them play JV just so they could get the reps, and then that helped them. I think at where I'm at now, we have too many good freshmen and sophomores that I don't want to take playing time away from them, because we also have a JV team as well. So that is very much dependent on your situation.
All right. Next one asks, do you record the winning score or the winning margin?
The winning margin. That's a good question. So, let's say a team wins 10-5. The winning team will get 5, and the losing team gets 0. Or we might change that to -5.
Awesome. And then the next question, is this run for varsity and JV freshman teams also?
In the past, so when I was at that small school when we did it, we just had one team. So everybody was thrown in, which I don't think is ideal. I think you need players that can compete with each other. I think your worst player, like number 12 on the roster, should be able to at least hang with the top guys on the roster. What we're going to do this year is we'll have varsity 1 through 12. They'll run it in the varsity practice, and then JV is going to have 15 guys, and they're also going to run it, but they'll have their own tournament and their own practice, and so we'll split it up. So let's say, and we have a big enough school that we, like last year, we did have a varsity, JV, and freshman, but we didn't run it on JV and freshmen because my coaches were not comfortable doing it on their own. They are now, like they're up to speed on it and they get it now, so they're gonna do it, but they weren't last year, so we just kind of let them run more of a traditional practice. I mean, we still did a lot of these same concepts, a lot of 3-on-3, a lot of 5-on-5, and we'd use constraints and things like that. It just wasn't the same ranking system like we did on varsity. So I think it will be beneficial to do it all the way through, or at least varsity and JV. Maybe freshmen don't need to. I don't know. It just depends on what your philosophy is, but I think it's more, is the coach comfortable? Does he understand it? And if he does, then use it all the way through, because then they get used to it. They get used to competing. It's a great way to learn. I love it for the younger players because I think it accelerates learning so much. That's the biggest reason why I love it. So I don't see any reason not to do it for the youngers.
Great. Well, I think that was the last question, but I want to thank you very much for sharing this system with all the coaches on here today. It was amazing content. I know coaches got a lot out of it, whether they choose to implement this or not, they have something they can take away into their own practices. I also want to thank all the coaches who took time out of their summer and took time out of their day to attend this webinar and hopefully attend future webinars as well. I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. I will let Ben give a final thank you and goodbye, but yeah, thanks everyone for joining today.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I hope you got a little bit out of it and learned a little bit. If you guys want to connect and talk more about it, you can email me. I put my email in the chat. I love talking about this and working on kind of developing a website so that other coaches can really use it and really implement it, because coming up with the tournaments is the most difficult part. But yeah, if you guys want to talk more about it, shoot me an email. Be happy to connect. We can link up on Zoom or a phone call or anything. But thank you guys so much. Really enjoyed doing this. Really enjoyed teaching. And so good luck with your seasons.
Awesome. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.